All right, and there we are. We have started recording. I am presenting a slideshow, so I think we're good to go, except for the light just went out on me. All right, here we are. Okay, so Mountain City Public Montessori. This is our first year, so this is March of our first school year. And these are photographs of our actual students in our actual classrooms, which feels really great to say as a first year school. Mountain City Public Montessori is Western North Carolina's only public Montessori school. So we are taking both the Montessori school that tends to be more private in nature, paid for, and combining it with that public charter school to make one school. We are located on the campus of Central United Methodist Church. We have the educational wing of the building. So this picture here is of the church side of the building, standing in the spot that we have lunch when we have lunch outside under the elms. It is a beautiful place to sit outside and have your lunch. And the educational wing is a separate piece of the building and has secured doors that go in and out of the church building and in and out to our parking lot. We do have a free and reduced lunch program for those who qualify. We partner with a company called Equal Plates Projects for that food. It's really yummy lunch. It's hot lunch. We have lasagna and green beans. We have meatloaf. We have macaroni and cheese and English peas. There's always an entree and a fruit and a vegetable side. We do have transportation available. We have a bus. Our bus runs through the Asheville City School District. It has some one like door-to-door stops and then also community stops available. It is catered to the community that needs it. So in part of the enrollment information, you do check a box that says whether or not you are in need of transportation in order to get your child to school. And that's the information that Brittany, our operations director, takes into account as she develops those routes for the bus. We have a variety of aftercare options, after school options. Our school day is from 8 until 3. And at 3 o'clock, we partner with community programs to bus children to, or they send a bus to us to pick up so that your student, if you need that care until you get off work, has that option. On Friday, we have early release at 1 o'clock, so our staff can have professional development time. And that 1 o'clock release, we also partner with community programs to offer aftercare options as well. We do expect to enroll about 140 students for this next school year, the 2024-2025 school year. We are currently kindergarten through 6th grade. We are expanding to 7th grade for this next school year and then 8th grade for the following. So in 2025-2026, we are going to be a school that is K through 8. Our mission here at Mountain City is to provide equitable access to a high quality, relevant Montessori education to meet the needs of all students and to strengthen our community. Our vision at Mountain City Public Montessori, we believe all students deserve access to a quality education that affirms each individual and enhances the collective by giving them an opportunity to practice living in and contributing to a more just society. Mountain City Public Montessori is a public charter school. So we follow all the state laws and requirements. So we do fire drills, we have security, we have a bus, we have a food program, we do all the things that a public school does. We have EC services, so we do IEPs and 504s. We have an exceptional children's coordinator here on site who helps provide services and guide our staff in development and knowledge. We use the beginning of grade and end of grade and other benchmark testing. So our students this year have done the beginning of grade, and we've also done another type of testing that's called the MAP testing, which is a test that is not required by the state, but is accepted by the state as a form of testing throughout the year to make sure that students are progressing along in the way that they need. It gives our teachers a better understanding of where that student is in that moment, as opposed to waiting until the end of the year to know what's going on. We also have teachers who are both North Carolina licensed and Montessori credentialed, and we also have teachers that are Montessori credentialed, and also have teachers who are North Carolina licensed but working towards Montessori credential. So both things are important as a Montessori public charter school. All right, I'm going to stop sharing right there for a second just to make sure that we all and so I can look at your faces and see if we have any questions about the school as a whole before we move on to specifically about the adolescent program. Awesome, because I am so excited to hear from our two adolescent teachers. We have Nancy Van Winkle and Jeff Allen, and both of them have so many years of experience, both teaching in adolescent programs and also, I'm waving at a student, teaching in adolescent programs and also building them from scratch, which is what we are doing here at our school. And I'm very excited to hear what they have to say about their vision for Mountain City Public Montessori. Would you like me to start sharing?
Well, maybe we should introduce ourselves first.
Okay, great.
Nancy,
Perfect.
Rachel, and we'll give our little background. Nancy, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm Nancy Van Winkle. Hi, it's nice to meet everybody. I'm really excited to get back to Southern Appalachia. My oldest son, who's now 20 years old, was born at Mission Hospital in Asheville. And we have spent many years in the East Tennessee, Western North Carolina region as a family, but most recently are in Greensboro, North Carolina, by way of Vermont. So I've been all over the place. But about 20 years ago, I started my first role in a Montessori school when my son was 1 year old. And prior to that, I had been doing my degrees in therapeutic recreation. So I had been doing work with adjudicated and at-risk youth in adventure-based counseling and experiential education settings. And so Montessori was a really great fit for me. I have worked in this field, like I said, for about 20 years in both independent and public settings. I've taught humanities and language arts and science and math. I've also, in that time, run a farm, Bramble Hill Farm, and I have run my own business making handmade books and fermented foods, and having a community-supported ferments program, really into food and fermentation and farming, and the arts and education and all those things. So I'm excited to be landing back in Western North Carolina, and super thrilled to be working with Jeff to build this program for the ground up, and Rachel and all the wonderful people at Mountain City Montessori. Turns out Rachel and I know each other from my training at Hershey Montessori School. And all three of us actually have been through the training at Hershey, which is, in my humble opinion, the best adolescent training program that exists. So we're excited to tell you a little bit more about what that looks like. I'll let you talk, Jeff.
Thank you, Nancy. Well, I feel like I already know quite a few of you, but welcome everyone. My name is Jeff. I've been teaching. I've been in education for a long time, but in the field, solely in the field of Montessori adolescent education for the past 18 years. And before that, I did a combination of public school and traditional school. I taught on an island for a while. I taught on a ship in Boston Harbor for a while. I have a really varied background with my teaching career. But like I said, for the last 18 years, it's been focused on Montessori adolescent education. I opened and taught at a Montessori middle school on Cape Cod. So we're starting up a new Montessori school here next year, which is awesome. I have that experience of doing that once before. And for the past several years, I've worked at a Montessori school in Florida that is not just a middle school, but goes all the way through 12th grade, high school as well. So I have experience on that end as well. In fact, both my kids graduated from that school, and they're now off doing their young adult things. But yeah, that's my sort of teaching experience. My interests, I love anything having to do with the outdoors, cycling, hiking, boating, all that great stuff. I love doing the farm related things that Nancy and I have quite a few parallels in our backgrounds. I grew up on a farm in Vermont. She lived in Vermont as well. So it's that I think there's really good connections there. And yeah, I mentioned I have my two kids. I also have a Montessori spouse, Miss Cheryl, who some of you may know. So I'm already well connected in the Mountain City public Montessori realm. Some of you might even know me as the bus driver, because when we moved here and Cheryl started working there, they said, "Oh, Jeff, that's great. You're a teacher, but do you have your CDL?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." But a lot of that has to do, as we'll talk later, about the adolescent program, about being able to get out and do things. That's why I can drive a bus, is because adolescent teachers need to be on the move with their students quite a bit. So anyway, that's me. I'm happy to be here.
I have to mention, because I forgot to say, that I also have two young adult children who are Montessori kids and are in college now, and a husband who's a cultural anthropologist and will be living in Asheville with me.
Thank you very much.
All
All right. I will start sharing. Let me do it out.
Oh, you know what, Nancy, though, we didn't mention our roles here.
Oh, sure.
How we're the co-leads for the adolescent program, but with our backgrounds, my focus is more on humanities, and Nancy's is more science. But we have a lot of crossover. So in that classroom next year, there will be two co-teachers, guides, adolescent guides, with the backgrounds we just told you about.
Exactly. All right. Rachel, would you like to bring up the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the characteristics of the adolescent. And I am starting here with the characteristics of the adolescent because Montessori education is guided by developmental needs. In Montessori education, we believe strongly in observing and reflecting on what we see in the children that we're working with. And so the entire Montessori pedagogy is really based on the developmental characteristics of the child that we're working with. So it's really important to understand where the adolescent is coming from in order to see why we do things the way that we do. So first and foremost, as we all, I think, know, when you hear the word adolescent, you just immediately think of it being this period of very rapid physical and emotional change. Adolescence is the most intense most intense growth next to infancy. So our adolescents are going through just so many changes with their physical bodies. They're growing in ways that they don't know what to do with. They're feeling a lot of new emotions. Their brain is changing in so many ways. So we think of our adolescents as, in society, unfortunately, often neither here nor there. They're no longer children, but they're not adults yet. And they're really trying to figure out their place in things. Their body's changing. The way people respond to them is changing. The way they see the world is changing. So it's a really, really sensitive period. I think we probably all remember our adolescence, and maybe some of the challenges that went along with that. Maria Montessori referred to adolescents as social newborns. So what that's referring to is as an adolescent around the age of 12, and of course this is different, it's going to be different with every child. Some children will start taking on these characteristics, right around the age of 12, and for some, they're a little bit more, in that second plane of development, we call it the cosmic child, where in elementary school, they're just, the world is their oyster and they're wanting to learn about the universe and everything's fascinating, and like learning is so intense. It's all about acquiring new information. Whereas for the adolescent, the social newborn part of things is referring to the fact that they're really coming into the world as new social beings. All of a sudden, they have these new perspectives, and they're starting to see that there's more than one way to see the world. It's not just about knowing about the universe or their family or the world that they live in, but it really becomes more about the people that they know and their social life. And really, they become super focused on themselves, which is why for some people working with adolescents can feel a little bit frustrating. But when you understand that need to really go inward and to really understand on the adolescent's part, like, why does this apply to me? Why does it matter? Why should I care? Those are really valid questions, and those are things that we really try to address in an adolescent program. They no longer want to learn for the sake of learning because it's fascinating. They want to know, why should I care? What does this mean for me? How can I connect to this? And what is my role? How can I contribute? What is it that I have that really matters? And they're trying on different hats, different masks. Your adolescent child may one day be really into like horses, right? They've always been into horses. And now all of a sudden, horses aren't cool. And horses are childish. And they don't want anything to do with anything that they were into as a child for some adolescents. It's also a really sensitive period for social justice. This is a time when, in elementary, upper elementary, starting to really look at what's fair, what's just, really starting to understand social justice issues. But as an adolescent, it's this seeing inequities and wanting to do something about it, wanting the adults in their lives to do something about it. You'll hear from your adolescent child, like, you can't let that happen. Why aren't you doing something about it? And they want to be around adults who are speaking up for those who maybe can't speak up for themselves. You also see a real need for self-expression, with all these new feelings and changing bodies and new development. The adolescents, typically really like to express themselves through art, unless maybe art was something they did a lot as a child and they're all of a sudden anti-art. But they're going to express that in their own way. They're going to have their bumper stickers on their cups and, wear their t-shirts, that like state who they are and what they stand for. So there is a lot of need for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we meet these needs, of course. And the last one that we really feel is important in Montessori that you don't see a lot in other schools is moving towards economic independence, really understanding how the economic system works, really wanting real world applications for production and exchange, and having a sense that they can do things that earn money, because financial security is something that's important in our society. So we do have what's called microeconomy in Montessori, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But overall, the learning style of the adolescent it shifts so much from like the hands-on manipulative lessons that they're doing in elementary if they're in a Montessori school, or even different hands-on sort of math manipulatives or things like that to really going into abstract thinking, not so much into that concrete, but looking more at abstract thinking and ways of doing things. They have this need to object, to argue, to analyze, and really are more about the application of knowledge more so than the acquisition of knowledge. Learning for learning's sake is no longer really going to engage an adolescent. It's really about how can this learning be applied to me, to the world that I live in, to my society. So that's a little bit about the characteristics of the adolescent. And Rachel, you can go to the next slide. So how do we meet the needs of the adolescent? And that's really what an adolescent program is about, is meeting those needs of the adolescent through the academic disciplines and through the other elements of our program. Slide. So one of the ways that we meet the needs is through real purposeful work. We call it the work of the head and the hand. And you'll see in this picture here, it's my coworker, Tim, working with Talea on a project for our land campus here in Greensboro. And that's part of their science lesson on ornithology. They're learning about birds. They use math to determine how to make bird boxes for nesting for bluebirds, which they had noticed were hanging out on the woods edge quite a bit. So that's an example of that, integration of the work of the hand and the head. Maria Montessori, who is the founder of Montessori Education, called this age group, this plane of development, Erdkinder, which is a German word meaning children of the earth. Believing that at this age, these adolescents need to be outside in fresh air, doing real work, real meaningful work, and use this term valorization. And I brought my t-shirt that says valorization on the back of it. That's for the school where I currently work. Valorization is the process of understanding that you are a strong and worthy person through your work, self-actualization and fulfillment. So what that looks like in a Montessori adolescent program, we'll talk a little bit more about, and it can look different in different programs. Maria Montessori thought it should, the program should be on a farm. We have downtown Asheville, so we can definitely find a lot of meaningful work in an urban environment, and that's what we're going to do. I mentioned the microeconomy. So microeconomy is an aspect of the program in which the students will be developing their own sort of business structure. Different schools do it differently. The really exciting thing about this program and developing this program and the students who are going to be 7th graders in this program next year is that what this looks like is really dependent on the students. So we believe in Montessori that you follow the child. What interest does the child have? We observe and we reflect. So what the microeconomy will look like, Mountain City Public Montessori, might be very different than what it looks like at other schools where I've been, and it's looked different at every school where I've ever been. There's almost always some kind of holiday market where students make handmade wares and sell them. Some schools have like regular markets like that. Some schools have garden produce that they sell, woodwork that they do, which Jeff is very enthusiastic about. Different projects that they engage in order to raise money. And then the students play a role in, or lead the role really, in not only developing what that microeconomy looks like and looking at, cost analysis and using math skills to figure out what they need to charge for a product in order to make X amount of dollars and all that good stuff, but also deciding where that money goes. So it's called a microeconomy because it's a, it's full circle, kind of figuring out what that pie looks like and how much of that pie is, donations to a local organization that we've been working with and volunteering with. How much of that will go to our spring trip or our fall trip? How much of that will go, into some project that the students determine. But all of that is very much the guides, Jeff and I, really working closely with the students to figure out what it is that we want and need. Creative expression and physical expression, any kind of self-expression that we do, might happen in our humanities or language arts or science or math classes, or we may have people come in and do some different self-expression classes with our students, or Jeff and I might be leading some self-expression classes that might be anything from doing visual journaling, which I like having props. This is my visual journal that I've done with students where we go through and learn different techniques for mixed media art and have different prompts that we use to write in our journals and stencil words and, express ourselves. It might look like going over to the park at lunchtime and playing Frisbee golf. That might be our physical expression, or it might be a class where we, learn how to, if students are really interested in playing soccer, or if we are interested in doing woodworking or whatever the case may be. So that stuff, we make sure that's incorporated into not only our daily work, but also into our classes. A lot of our coursework involves, teaching core concepts, having students work with those concepts to develop them and understand them better, and then having some sort of expression come out of that. So if we're reading a book on the fire in the Triangle Waste Factory, and students are writing responses about that book, and then we create a visual book ourselves with their writing and images from that book, that is an example of maybe a creative expression that comes out of the work that we're doing in class. And then the last thing I'll say about the purposeful work is Socratic seminars are an integral part of Montessori Adolescent program. And so Socratic seminars look like students having a discussion about a reading, a common reading that everybody does on a regular basis. Well, Socratic seminars where students will run these discussions, and they're based on questions. There's a lot of guidance around what that looks like and what kind of questions will be asked, and the ways that we listen to each other and communicate with each other, and really have really thoughtful discussions and think critically about literature and about topics that are relevant to us. Might be an article about a current event. It might be some historical literature, but it's always about really how we engage and talk with one another. And it's a really beautiful thing for students to be able to learn to listen and respond intelligently to one another. And, we sit in a circle. It's not like students are raising their hands to answer questions. It's really a facilitated discussion, which is a really nice thing. So that's a few pieces of the program that you maybe wouldn't see in quite the same way in most schools. And then Jeff's going to talk a little bit next about creating a community. And that's such an important part of meeting that social part of the adolescent development. Take it away, Jeff.
All right, thank you, Nancy. So, as Nancy mentioned before, part of the philosophy for adolescents is that they're social newborns, and they're learning how to sort of navigate their way in the world. And for an adolescent Montessori program, what we try to do is create a prepared environment. Just like at any other level of Montessori, there's a prepared environment, right? If you go into a If you go into a lower elementary classroom, you'll see a prepared environment of materials on the shelves. I apologize, that's my dog. This is not a prepared environment, apparently. And they're working with those materials. Well, for adolescents, in one sense, the materials are each other. They're learning how to work together as a community. So the focus on developing that community intentionally and with care is extremely important. It's probably even more important than the academics, because what we're really doing in any level of Montessori, but especially with adolescents, is where we're preparing them for the next step, preparing them for adulthood, really. And adults and young adults who are going to be launched into the world need to learn how to communicate. They need to learn how to work out their problems. They need to learn how to band together, work together to solve things. So creating that sense of community, creating that sense of also that the school is a safe place where they can be free to express themselves. It's a place where no one's going to be laughing at them if they have some crazy idea that they want to bounce off of people. Like, so having that sort of environment of mutual respect, responsibility, working together is very important. So there's ways that we try to facilitate that. One of the ways is with pretty frequent, but at least daily, community meetings where the program is meeting together to really sort of, sometimes it might be sort of something that's, like, okay, what's going on today? What's our schedule today? But sometimes they're going to be solving some really big issues and problems in these community meetings. And there's a lovely picture of one on the slide that I keep going back to. Rachel, we need to get one of those rugs for the classroom. I love that one. But fireplace would be nice too, I guess, but I won't.
I was looking at the fireplace.
So, to be able to meet like that in an environment where every child has a voice and they're able to discuss things at a pretty adult level is really important to how the program functions. Going along with the idea of community is community service. That goes back to the idea that they're looking at society and figuring out what they can do to help and how this is all working. Well, so encouraging service opportunities, giving them that sense of, oh, if I do this, I'm really helpful. It's purposeful. That's important as well. And then the next one on that slide is residential elements, with residential in quotations. Okay, so Maria Montessori's vision of an adolescent program was a residential one, basically a boarding school where the students would live on a farm and work there and then go to school there. And parents would occasionally visit and stay in a bed and breakfast type situation run by the students. Well, there are some Montessori schools that are like that, like Nancy mentioned Hershey School, for example. It's not a practicality, I would say, for us, at least not right away on Church Street. But there are things we can do that can offer some similar sort of residential opportunities. For example, going on trips, other types of just going out opportunities that might not be as long. But anytime we get them, sort of out of their comfort zone a little bit, having to work together, solve some problems. When we do in an adolescent program, we do what might be considered a field trip. Unless we're going to a field, I would not call it a field trip, because usually what these experiences are things that the students have helped plan. They know what they're going to be doing when they go there. They know how they're going to be working together. Like, the opportunity for them to be a community becomes extremely important at that adolescent level. Nancy mentioned the upper elementary, what their focus is on. That tends to be more sort of individual work, individual projects. I'm going to do my project on this, you're going to do your project on that. In the adolescent program, we look for opportunities for them to work together, to do something. And that doesn't mean they're all doing the same thing. You know, they could all have different specialties and whatever they're working on in a community type project. But we do want them to get the sense that they're in it together. Listed in that last bullet point is care of self, care of others, and care of environment. Those are also some principles of an adolescent program. So they all have to do with the idea that adolescents are learning about responsibility, you know, and care, and taking care of their needs, taking care of others' needs, taking care of the environment's needs. You know, that goes along, that it's in this community slide because it kind of, those sort of concepts go along with that. The idea that they can work together towards, it could be a better tasting lunch, or it could be working together towards a better world. You know, there's different scales, right? But that's sort of care of self, care of others, care of environment. That's also a really important concept to us, and we'll speak a little bit more about it, I think, later. Let's click the next slide. Am I the next slide as well? I think maybe, oh, Nancy, I think you're starting because of science, maybe.
Yeah.
You.
Thanks, Jeff. So now we're getting to the academic part of the program, and you're probably wondering, wow, this just sounds like so much fun. Where do you fit in all of this schoolwork? Well, it's intertwined into all of it, believe it or not, which is not always an easy thing to do. But Jeff and I have a lot of experience with this. And so in an adolescent program, we refer to the sciences as science occupations, which might sound a little odd at first, but the idea is that we choose an occupation through which a lens to view our sciences. So we definitely use the state standards to ensure that every child in our program gets all of the science standards met that they need. However, the way that we do that is not necessarily saying, okay, right now we're studying cell biology, so we're going to learn parts of the cell. We're going to learn what all the parts do. We're going to, make a model of the cell. It doesn't really work that way in our programs. Instead, for example, I always like to use food preservation as my science occupations example, although, science occupations can incorporate everything from forest ecology to bicycles for physics to all kinds of earth sciences, life sciences, and physical sciences. But I'm just going to use food preservation as an example of how an occupation might look, in that we are learning key concepts relating to cells and microbiology. And we are learning about the different kingdoms, phylum, order, class, species, all that stuff, when we're looking at our bacteria, which is kind of at the heart of the food preservation occupation that I've done. And chemistry comes in there quite a bit too. So in a food preservation occupation, we're looking not only at the food preservation methods that are created to kill bacteria, undesirable bacteria, so that food becomes more shelf stable and can last a longer period of time. But we're also looking at food preservation techniques that look to promote the growth of beneficial bacteria, as in the case of fermentation. And there's so many different kinds of fermentation, and it's just really really relevant and fascinating to be able to learn these key concepts and then turn around and put that into practice in an occupation where we're, making a big crock of sauerkraut, we're canning jam to sell at our winter marketplace as part of our microeconomy. We're experimenting with sourdough and baking bread and looking at the chemistry of baking. We're learning about pH, because when you ferment things, you really have to check about, what the pH is. Same thing with canning, that acids and bases is really important knowledge. So these key concepts get presented as very short lessons, and then students do activities in order to, that's the first period lesson, is learning the key concepts. Second period lesson is actually doing extensive activities like looking at pH of different foods, looking at pH of different substances, things like that. And then a third period lesson would look like students, once they've learned those basics, those basic science concepts and applied those, then they choose something that they really want to go deep into and do a project that might look like a creative expression. It might look like some sort of a presentation. They might develop some sort of activity. They might develop a product. It can really look different for different students, and it can be a whole class third period, or it can be very individual or small groups. But all in all, what students are getting is a real deep understanding of the science concepts that they choose to go deep into, and a very basic understanding of all of the things that they need to know in order to make connections to other science concepts. And of course, in science, we'll also go over like the scientific method and safe practices in the lab, and writing a lab report and how that's different, a different style of writing. So all the different topics, and we incorporate things like health and wellness and like human body systems and things like that, which are so important at this age to understand how our bodies are developing and why all these strange things are happening to our bodies that didn't used to be there. So that's a little bit about science, and I'll let Jeff talk a little bit about humanities.
So the other major component of the adolescent program for academics is the study of the humanities. And that is, just like it says, the study of human beings and what they've produced and what they've accomplished. It is, in a way, it combines what you might think of as a study of social studies with a study of English language arts, but also, sociology, psychology. It really is the humanities, because Maria Montessori recognized that you can't really just split things out like that. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to have 45 minutes of an English class about this, and then 45 minutes of a social studies class that has nothing to do with what we did in English. It's the humanities. It's one thing. So the way that looks for a middle school is, it's a deep dive into civilizations and the study of humanity and civilization. And the actual topics can vary based on students' interests. It could vary based on the needs of the state curriculum. It depends on what the situation is. But really what we're doing in the middle school is we're looking at emerging civilizations, classical civilizations, civilizations in transition, modern civilizations, and by the way, like when I throw out a word like classical, I don't mean just Greece and Rome. This is a global curriculum. This is all over the world. So, for example, looking at emerging civilizations, that could be Mesopotamia. It could be Indus River Valley. It could be civilizations in Western Africa and along the Niger River. Looking at civilizations growing up next to rivers. That actually reminds me of the other component of the study of humanities is always connecting it to something local. We want it's pedagogy of place. We want to make these adolescents feel that we're not just kind of looking at things out in the ether, that things are actually meaningful to them and relevant to them personally. It might be relevant to their, personal background, but it also might be relevant to where they are. If we're looking at a civilization, an ancient civilization developing along a river, we can look at why were the Cherokee Why did they want to be where the French Broad River and the Shenandoah River came together? And that's why Asheville is here, is because those two rivers happen to come together right here. So there's a lot of connections you can make to the local community, and that kind of brings me to my next point, that part of the study of humanities is doing research. It is going to the library. It is looking at primary sources, but some of those primary sources are going to be community experts we bring in, or community members, people who have knowledge of whatever we're looking at. So incorporating that and going places and having things be really, hands-on, getting out into the community, whether it's at a museum or it's in the woods or whatever, really looking at humanities from a much more rich perspective than you could ever get out of just the internet or just the textbook. That's the humanities piece, and that's how it works. And as Rachel mentioned, we are a public school. So part of my job and Nancy's job is we do connect, the state standards, the threads, to what we're doing in the classroom. But it might not be in the exact order, that is presented in a list of state standards. I always think of state standards as something that it's sort of like the bare minimum in a way. Yes, we easily cover all of that. But we're going to be doing just so much more. And for middle school in North Carolina, it's a couple years of global studies and a year of American history. Well, all of that stuff can be worked into our Montessori humanities curriculum, as well as the writing skills and the research skills, and that they would be getting in an English class, let's say in a traditional school. Like all those basic, all those skills, all those sort of goalposts, those are all there as part of the program. It's just we're looking at these things in a much more in-depth way than you might get elsewhere. And I'm going to talk about sort of what a typical day might look like, but part of that going in depth is these longer work cycles. Just like you see in a Montessori classroom in primary or elementary, these work periods where they really get a chance to working together a lot, working individually to really get a chance to dive into this material and own it. And that's so the science occupations, the humanities, those complement each other as well, right? Because if you're doing food preservation and I'm doing, I don't know, the bubonic plague or something, we can figure out how to combine that, right? There's always these cross curriculum, connections that we work together to do. And even though we introduced ourselves as sort of, I was the humanities person, Nancy's the science person, we move back and forth. So when there's humanities happening, Nancy's involved with that as well. When there's a science occupation happening, I'm involved with that as well, especially the bicycle one. I really like that idea. But that's so it's not like the kids are saying, oh, it's humanities class time, I'm going to go to Jeff's class. Oh, it's science time, I'm going to go to Nancy's class. It doesn't work like that. And then complementing those major academic components are workshops about specific needs for specific students. It can be really individualized. And that's where they get, the algebra skills they might need in math workshops. That's where they get, how to write a bibliography in a writing workshop. So there's lots of different ways we can offer the curriculum, and that makes sense to the student. It's not just busy work. It's something where they're seeing the meaning of it, but they're also getting what they need to move to the next level. Yeah. And Nancy, did you want to speak to? I see on the slide it says Jeff and Nancy in parentheses. That was just to remind ourselves that that we could talk about those things.
Yeah, I think, and I think, you know, small group and individual work for mathematics and language arts and things like that sort of speaks for itself. But I did want to bring up, like with health and wellness, one of those things about adolescence that every parent worries about is like, what about sex education? So there are certain things that will be incorporated like into the sciences, right? But we will also have, you know, people that we work with who come in from Planned Parenthood to do some sex ed with the students with consent from the parents. And also different needs that might arise. Like, we are resources and we see ourselves as resources. We're generalists who know a little bit about a lot of things, but not a lot about, well, maybe a lot about some things, but we don't have to know all the answers, but we do need to know where to guide our students if they have an interest or a need that is outside our realm of knowledge. And so there will be various elements of the program where we'll invite other people in, and then always have guest speakers and field experiences and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a day in the life. We move a lot of ladders. Well, when Nancy and I were working on the slideshow, this was a tricky list to come up with because it's hard to say what a typical day is. That's not to say they don't have a schedule, you know, that's not to say they don't have regular things coming up, but you know, there's a lot of variety in a typical day for a Montessori adolescent. But in general, obviously there's an arrival time where they're coming in, they're getting a chance to take a breath, some quiet kind of downtime, you know, making sure they're prepared for the day. And that's usually then followed by a community meeting, which we saw a picture of from before. And that community meeting doesn't have to happen first thing in the morning. Sometimes it's at lunchtime, sometimes it's at the end of the day. But the idea of that is that there's a time during every day where they're coming together as a community and working through any issues they have, figuring out what their schedule is going to be, talking about an upcoming trip, you know, whatever it is. It's connections. It's about being connected. These community meetings are we all participate in them, the teachers and the students. The students generally run them, you know, and there's an agenda that we all working together to set an agenda and discussion like that. It could be an advisory type period where, you know, they're working on a specific skill like writing a resume or problem solving something they need to be working on in the program. The community meetings play a big role. There's usually a morning work cycle, which could be a humanities period, could be an occupations period, but it's usually, the important part is that it's not chopped up. You know, we don't have 7 periods a day like a traditional school. There's a longer period where they can really get in the flow, get focused, and also gives them opportunity to do those, you know, those things they need to do together, the things they need to do individually. It's like keeping that work cycle intact is important on a day like when they're on campus working. Lunch and recess. I don't usually call it recess at that, but the idea is that eating is important. Healthy eating is important. And lunches in adolescent programs tend to be longer. Some adolescents need a long time to eat. Some adolescents they all are going to be socializing, which is part of what we are actually encouraging that. Remember, we actually encourage them to work together on things. Also, it's also a time where they can get a little, exercise, a little energy out, because middle schoolers, adolescents for sure need that. Afternoon work cycle. If the morning work cycle was a longer, say, a humanities period, the afternoon, that might be a time when a visitor's coming in to speak. It might be a time when they're doing workshops. There could be, a math workshop going on, then a writing workshop going on. And that could flip-flop with not everyone attending everything at the same time. That's a good time for those types of things. And then restoring the environment. That's a Montessori concept as well. At the end of the day, you restore the environment to even better than where you left it. And that's true whether we're in the classroom or on a trip. So sometimes they refer to it as jobs, like, oh, what are my jobs? What's my list? Where's the list of jobs? But they all have something to do at the end of the day, working together. If this had the residential component, then their jobs would include, Rachel knows, making dinner, washing the sheets, cleaning the bathrooms. We're not going to have them clean the bathrooms, at least not next year. Right, Rachel? Can I say that? Yeah.
We will have a custodian cleaning the third floor. And
but in a Montessori, residential environment, they do everything. They keep house. So but for our purposes, it's really restoring the area. And for those of you who are familiar with the building, the adolescent program is going to be on the 3rd floor, which is going to be renovated over the summer, just like the first 2 floors were renovated last summer. It's a really nice, big physical space, good for adolescents. And there will be areas up there where they can accomplish their science, they can accomplish cooking, they can accomplish humanities. There's going to be places where they can work together as groups, but also there's places where they can go when they need some quiet time to work individually. All that stuff. And this is just a quote, which I really like. The chief symptom of adolescence is a state of expectation, a tendency towards creative work, and a need for the strengthening of self-confidence. That just kind of says it all, I feel like. They're kind of waiting for the next big thing, but at the same time, they really want that creativity. They really want to become more self-confident, independent. They're pushing boundaries because they're trying to find those boundaries. They're trying to figure out, like, okay, how does this world work, this social world?
Yeah. And we're going to take some time for questions. Sorry, it went a little bit later than expected, so I hope people can stick around for questions. I think now is a good time to go ahead and start that.
all right, Michael, you're welcome to have your question.
I was just wondering if we'll have access to this slide deck after y'all finish today.
Make that happen. The video will be posted as well, in case you want to listen again. But yes, we can make that happen.
Any other questions?
Well, can you talk a little bit just about the size of the class next year and what that's going to look like, please?
Sure. So the maximum, or correct me if I'm wrong, it's first of all, it's going to be just 7th grade next year, with a maximum of 14 students. Is that the number?
That is, yeah.
So we're starting small, and I think it's, they're going to be sort of the founding class of the middle school. I think with that, it's going to be with that's going to come some sort of level of responsibility, because they're going to sort of be setting the standard for the groups that come after, because next year we'll be adding 8th grade, and 7th and 8th grade will both be expanding in size. So we'll be moving, expanding that way. But for next year, it will be just 7th graders.
Michael,
Will the 7th and 8th grade always be in separate classrooms, or are there any,
They will almost never be in separate
I
classrooms.
don't know, workstation classes where they're always blending?
Sorry?
I lost the end of it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? So
Yep.
Montessori means multi-age classrooms. They will almost always be
Yep.
working together. I could see possibilities, though, of course, when they are getting the math, for example, that they might need. You know, if you have someone who is working in, you know, at an algebra level and someone who's not there yet, they're going to be in probably separate groupings when it comes to math workshops, let's say, for example. But it's never like, oh, the 7th graders do this, the 8th graders do that, because you may have some 7th graders who are doing algebra and some 8th graders who are not. You know, it's more based on, the groupings are based on their needs, not their grade level.
But given that there is no 8th grade yet, for this upcoming year, 7th grade will be sort of a pod unto itself. Is that right?
That's true for this year, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be an unusual year.
It will be. And also to Jeff's point, there still may be groups divided up within the 7th grade, depending on their skills and needs. But yeah, this will be an unusual year.
Right. And I was saying to Nancy, I think it's really neat that, you know, part of multi-age classroom is so that you have students with all sorts of different levels of experience, and the younger kids are looking at the older kids, and the older kids are helping the younger. You know, it's a really nice. It works so nicely. I think for next year, even though they're just all 7th graders, so they're all the same age basically. The fact that they're going to be coming from different experiences, different places, is gonna sort of be very similar to that multi-age setting. You know, we'll have, of those 12, you know, about a quarter will be from Mountain City, and the others will be from maybe other Montessori schools or traditional schools or home schools or whatever. I think that's going to be a really good thing. And I know from my personal experience with once you open a Montessori middle school, not only does it draw in a variety of people from the area and with that variety of backgrounds, people start moving. People start moving to your area just so their kids can attend a Montessori middle school. So I think that's something that could happen as well.
Lauren.
You're muted.
Okay,
You're-
sorry.
There you are.
Hi.
Hello.
So, and you kind of answered a little bit of that just then, or answered a little bit of my question just then. And hi, Nancy.
Hi. I thought I
We
recognized you.
actually moved here from Winston last year, so old neighbors. But was just curious, like how you'll integrate the students from different backgrounds without Montessori, you know, it's more accustomed to the conventional.
Yeah, that's a great question. My experience, and you know, Jeff probably has a similar experience, but maybe different, is that because Montessori adolescent programs typically start in the 7th grade, almost every year there's always students who are not from the Montessori background who come into the school. A lot of families discover Montessori at the middle school age because their child's having such a hard time with the dynamics of public school or whatever. So, so having students from different backgrounds actually comes really naturally, because in Montessori, so much of the lessons from primary all the way up through lower and upper elementary build on each other. A lot of the philosophy is the same in an adolescent program, as far as like following the child and, you know, prepared environment and all of the practical life skills and things like that. But the way it looks in an adolescent program is just so different. And every child coming in is sort of discovering the culture together. So I think that my experience is that middle school is really, really hard. It's like a horrible experience for a lot of people. But in a Montessori middle school environment, there's like kind of a sense of like shoulders relaxing and a like sort of breath, a relief, an exhale of relief.
Right.
And because the needs are just really getting met, and there's so much opportunity for students to really be celebrated for who they are. And it's not so much about, conforming. It's
Thinking
more,
of the papers. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Makes
So-
sense.
that's my experience.
And then one last question, and it might be more, I don't know, Rachel, or I don't know, but so when you do the lottery, is it able to do, or do you look at, I guess right now, my daughter's the only 6th grade girl in the school. And so in 7th grade, is there gonna or do we know, do you set like a gender, or maybe you can't set or don't set that, I don't know, but it's a good mix of, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. I think what you're searching for is, will she have other girls in
Yes.
the program?
Yes, yes.
And while we don't set it by gender, like we don't draw your name by gender, I can
Right.
tell you that the list is populated, because we can see who is on the list currently. And the list is populated with female candidates, female students as well. So there is a high likelihood, like very, very high likelihood, that
Okay.
there will be other girls.
Okay. But it's kind of more chance. There's not like an allocated 6 girls, 6 boys, or whatever. Okay. Got it. Okay. Excellent. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And Lauren, we can talk off this Zoom call if you would like to speak to Brittany more specifically around that. I'm sure she would. Just call us tomorrow and she can talk to you more directly if you need to. Okay.
When I'll be up there, I was curious too, not just, I mean, and she's loving her year there, so don't get me wrong.
Of course. Yeah,
Curious.
I know. Yeah. And it's a different thing, adolescence. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Can I do middle school all over again with y'all?
We get that a lot.
Well,
Yeah. And we didn't even really talk about the trips and things like that. So, yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. This was great.
please feel free to reach out with